Hello, Matthew Bell here again. Today I want to talk a little bit about retirement products. Now, my ambition ultimately is to talk about how there are certain strategies where life insurance can actually be used as a retirement supplement, probably the best way of thinking about it. I realize that before I talk about life insurance as a retirement supplement, it would probably be wise for me to at least sketch the lay of the land regarding what retirement vehicles look like in the main. So today I'm going to talk just a little bit about the three main vehicles that people think about when they think about retirement planning. So the main retirement vehicles are going to be three. That's going to be the traditional IRA, the Roth IRA, and the 401k. For the most part, these vehicles are going to be those that you can contribute to for your retirement as long as you have earned income. I should say from the get-go, just as a disclaimer, I am not an accountant. I am not a financial advisor. I am not a lawyer. And even if I were any of those things, I could not give you specific recommendations because I don't have access to the information that I would need in order to do so. So this video is for general informational or entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as financial or any other kind of advice. Now, when we think about retirement plans, there's going to be those that are employer-sponsored, like the 401k. Others that are often included in that bracket are going to be the 403b and the 457b. Those plans are generally for nonprofit organizations or for government agencies. They have similarities and a few differences from the 401k, but for the most part, they're going to fall in the same general categories as what we're discussing with respect to the 401k in terms of how contributions and distributions work, generally speaking. There are a few caveats to that. But getting into that is going to be beyond the scope of what this video is intended to be. So for our purposes, a 401k is an employer-sponsored retirement plan. It is generally offered by for-profit corporations, companies, and the like of this. Contributions to a 401k are tax deductible the year that they are made. So that generally means that you fund this with what sometimes is referred to as pre-tax money or pre-tax dollars. What that basically comes down to is, think about, I'm going to make the numbers up to make them somewhat easy here, but if a person is bringing in $100,000 of gross income, and let's say they make an 8% contribution annually to their 401k. Let's say they get a 6% match maybe. So they have 8% going into their 401k. Well, 8% of $100,000 is $8,000. So when they report that to the IRS, presumably through their tax preparer will write down, $100,000 of gross income, and then he or she will subtract $8,000 as a deduction from that for the amount of money that they contribute to their 401k. So apart from any other deductions, not including the standard deduction, not including any medical deductions or anything else that they might be able to deduct, $100,000 of gross income minus an $8,000 contribution to the 401k that year would result in an adjusted gross income of $92,000. So there is a tax break on the contribution. Now this sort of thing is often referred to as a qualified retirement plan, and really all the word qualified means here is that there is some special agreement with Uncle Sam, some special agreement with the Internal Revenue Service in particular. And that special agreement in the case of the 401k is going to be that the money that is put into it is tax deductible the year that it is contributed. Now then, once the money is in the 401k, that money will grow tax deferred, and then the person is actually going to pay tax on 100% of the money when he or she takes a distribution. So in other words, the money is not taxed going in, it's not taxed year to year as it grows, and many times, although certainly not always, the money that's in a 401k is going to be invested in whatever and is at least going to be capable in principle of accruing earnings over the duration of time that it is in the 401k. And when this occurs, those earnings are going to grow tax deferred. So the owner of that 401k account is not going to be paying taxes on the interest, not going to be like he or she would in a CD. Every year, they're not going to be paying taxes until they go to take a distribution. Now, why would a person take a distribution? Well, the idea would be that in retirement, it is likely that for a person, let's say, who doesn't have a pension, that that person is going to have to live on, or at least is going to partially live on, the amount of money that they've put aside for their retirement, so that they're either going to be drawing principal down or they're going to be taking interest off of whatever amount that they have accrued for purposes of living on in retirement. So once they retire from their main line of employment, whatever amount is in the 401k is going to form part, this is the idea, of their retirement program, and then that money is going to generate an income for whoever it is that is the owner of that account. Now, one of the attractive things about the 401k is often that employers will offer a match. Not every employer does offer a match, and the amount of money that's matched is going to vary. You have to look at your benefit package in order to be sure whether this applies to you in your situation. But when there is a match offered, it's very attractive, because the idea is you're going to get a guaranteed return on your money, at least from the standpoint of if you put in $1,000 and your employer matches that, then the employer is going to kick in $1,000. Now, again, in the example that I just made up, a person makes $100,000, contributes $8,000, that is 8% of his or her salary, and in that hypothetical example, let's say the employer matches 6% on that 8%. So they would actually put in $6,000 for the $8,000 that the employee contributes. So many people think of this as free money, and indeed this is a very good thing when you can have this available to you, and many people are encouraged to take advantage of that free money via the employer match in their 401k program. Now, there are limitations on the amount of money that can be contributed to a 401k. As I sit here recording this video, it is 2019, and presently the limitation for the amount of money that can be put into a 401k in 2019 for a person who is 50 years old, who is younger than 50 years old, is $19,000 in a year. Over the age of 50, there is a catch-up provision, what's called a catch-up provision, and that would enable a person who is 50 or older to actually put in a total of $25,000 in a year. Now, I don't want to get too stuck in the weeds. This is likely to vary from year to year, and that is going to be likely the subject for another video, but suffice it to say that you can't just put in any amount of money you want, but the 401k does allow for a considerable amount of money to be put into it. Now, a second retirement vehicle that's often utilized is the traditional IRA. Now, a traditional IRA can simply be begun, and IRA, by the way, stands for individual retirement account. These kinds of individual retirement accounts can be started by basically any person who is receiving earned income, and it can be an alternative to a 401k if, for example, a person's employer does not have a 401k program. There are other alternatives as well, but it also can be a supplement in and of itself to the 401k. So you might have a 401k and you might also have an IRA. In fact, a person can have multiple IRAs. One reason might be that they have taken a previous 401k and done what's called a rollover, at which point they have moved the money from their original 401k and have placed it into an individual retirement account. Once again, just like the 401k, contributions to a traditional IRA are tax deductible. At least they are generally tax deductible. There are certain income limitations that come into play, and in a few cases it may be that a person might make a non-deductible contribution to an IRA, but we're going to put those kinds of niceties aside and simply say that the traditional IRA functions very similarly with respect to contributions as did the 401k. Namely, the money you put in is going to be, generally speaking, tax deductible the year that you contribute it. Also, like the 401k, that money will grow tax deferred, and once again, like the 401k, you will be taxed on the contributions and whatever earnings there may or may not be at the time that you take a distribution from the traditional IRA. Now, we should also point out that the Internal Revenue Service, in its wisdom, has stated that when a person hits the age of 70 and a half, then that person must start to take distributions from either a 401k or from a traditional IRA. That's called a required minimum distribution. So these accounts, the idea is, were set up for retirement, And if you haven't started to use them to a certain extent by the age of 70 and a half, then the Internal Revenue Service will start to force feed you that money in order to make sure that they get some of the tax settled up so that it can't be simply kicked down the road indefinitely. Now, another thing to consider is, whereas at the age of 70 and a half, you must start to take money out of your traditional IRA, at the age of 59 and a half, you may. And in fact, prior to the age of 59 and a half, you can be penalized for taking money out of your retirement accounts. There are exceptions. For example, first-time homebuyers can withdraw a bit of money from their retirement account. As of this writing, I believe is up to $10,000 that they can withdraw without a penalty. Of course, they're going to pay tax. So you want to distinguish between paying tax on your money and being penalized. So the penalty would be an additional 10% that's assessed on top of whatever tax you owe. You cannot take money, spend it out of a 401k or a traditional IRA without paying some tax on it. But if you're over the age of 59 and a half, you can take the money out without being penalized on it. Now, the 401k, again, is an attractive vehicle partially where employers offer a match. The IRA and the 401k are both attractive, especially if you believe that the taxes that you are going to have to pay are going to be less substantial in retirement. So for example, if you think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket, if you think that lower tax bracket is going to be charging you a lesser percentage of tax, then in other words, your effective tax rate will go down in retirement. If you think that, then a 401k and an IRA are excellent vehicles to place money into. And the idea there would be, while you are in your working years, you are likely to be in a higher tax bracket, maybe earning more money. And then in retirement, you may take a pay cut, be ratcheted down a bracket or two. And in that respect, when you then start taking distributions from your 401k or from your IRA, at that point, you will be in a lower tax bracket, and the idea is you'll save money on the amount of taxes that you'll have to pay. Now, there's a third option that I'm going to speak about today, and that is the Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA is also an individual retirement account. It's also tax qualified in the sense that I stated earlier, namely that there is a special agreement between a person who has a Roth and the Internal Revenue Service. But the agreement is different. It's not the same agreement as what was in place with the traditional IRA or the 401k. So with respect to the Roth, you actually are going to fund the Roth with what is called post-tax money. That is to say, you do not receive a deduction when you contribute money to a Roth IRA. So in the example that I gave previously, a person who has a 401k, for example, I said, making $100,000, contributed $8,000, and that $8,000 was deducted from the gross income of $100,000 to arrive at an adjusted gross income of $92,000. And again, I'm not taking into consideration standard deduction, any other deductions that might be applicable. It is simply the contribution to the 401k was $8,000, and that comes off the gross income for a deduction. Well, in the case of a Roth, the amount of money that can be contributed is going to be different. So the limitation for a person receiving earned income to be able to contribute to a Roth or to a traditional IRA is $6,000 for a person who is younger than 50 years old. And if a person is 50 years old or more, then they can contribute $7,000. So let's say that we have a 55-year-old who in a given year contributes the full $7,000 to his Roth. In this case, if he makes $100,000 and contributes $7,000 to his Roth, he does not get a deduction for that contribution the way he would have, let's say, if he had put the $7,000 into a traditional IRA or into his 401k instead. However, the Roth, as I said, also has a qualification, and that is to say it has an agreement with the Internal Revenue Service. And the agreement basically is this, is that in the case of a Roth, whereas you pay tax on the contribution, you don't get a deduction, the earnings, whatever there may be in that account, will still grow tax deferred. And then when it comes time to take a distribution, the real benefit of the Roth is that that distribution is possibly going to be tax free, so that you will not be taxed on the earnings of that Roth. Now, the difference here is, or the requirements here are several. The first requirement is that the person has to be over the age of 59 and a half when they take their distribution from their Roth. And the second requirement is that the Roth has to have been opened for 5 years before they take a distribution. And if those two requirements are met, then the amount of money that is received from the Roth as a distribution is going to be entirely tax-free. Now, the Roth is a favorable vehicle, particularly if you believe that your tax rate may be higher in the future than it is right now. Now, whereas you may still believe that you're going to be in a lower bracket, it is possible for a person to believe, let's say, that the tax brackets might be readjusted so that the effective tax rate attached to the brackets might be higher in the future. And that would be the case, for example, if taxes go up in the future. There are a number of reasons for this. Some people argue for this. I'm not going to get into those reasons presently. That will be a topic for a future video. But suffice it to say that a Roth would be a favorable vehicle if a person believes that their tax rates are going to be higher in the future than they are right now. So you settle up taxes now, and then when you take a distribution from your Roth, you get that tax-free, given the stipulations that I said earlier. Now, there are income limitations on the amount of money that a person can make when they are able to contribute to a Roth. So single filers, taxpayers who file singly, can make only up to $122,000 to be able to contribute fully to a Roth, and then they are phased out up to $137,000 so that they can contribute a little bit but not the full amount, and after $137,000, single taxpayers would be ineligible to contribute to a Roth. For people who are married filing jointly, the income would be $193,000, and then the phase out goes all the way up to $203,000. So once again, there are limitations on the amount of money that you can make to contribute to a Roth, and like the traditional IRA and the 401k, there are limitations on the amount of money that you can place inside of these vehicles on a yearly basis. Now, the Roth has one interesting secondary possibility, and that is there is something called a Roth conversion. It is sometimes called a backdoor Roth, and the idea here would be that you take an account that was set up either as a 401k or a traditional IRA, and you perform what is called a Roth conversion. Essentially, what you would be doing is settling the taxes up on the amount of money, either wholly or partially, in that account. In, let's say it's a traditional IRA, maybe it was a rollover from a 401k itself. Let's say there's $100,000 in a traditional IRA. The idea would be you could either do a full or a partial Roth conversion by settling up taxes on a portion of that money or on all of the money, and effectively turn that vehicle into a Roth IRA instead of a traditional IRA. Now, when this is done, some different rules apply. The income limitation does not apply. Additionally, the annual contribution limit does not apply. But because it's treated as converted money rather than a contribution, there are some additional rules. Once again, going into this is going to be beyond the scope of the present video. Suffice it to say that we have three main retirement vehicles: the 401k, the traditional IRA, and the Roth IRA. Again, each has its pluses and minuses. A lot of people like the idea that the 401k and the traditional IRA both give you tax breaks on the contributions in the year that you make them, which can lower the amount of tax that you pay in a given year as you are contributing to those funds. And in retirement, if you think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket, or if you think you're going to be paying a lesser tax amount, then it is attractive to invest in those as well, because when you take distributions, you're going to be saving some money on taxes, the idea. Contrary-wise, the Roth has certain advantages, particularly for people who would prefer to settle up the taxes now. Perhaps they believe that the tax rates are going to be higher in the future, and if that's the case, they are going to receive a tax break by using the Roth instead of the traditional IRA or the 401k. The Roth also has certain advantages with respect to Social Security. Social Security benefits can be taxed at up to 85% of the benefit, and those percentages are calculated in part based on something that the Social Security Administration calls provisional income. So the lower you can keep your provisional income, the less the idea is that you're going to have to pay in tax on your Social Security benefit. And one benefit of a Roth IRA is that distributions from the Roth are tax free, the other benefit is that the distribution from the Roth is not considered provisional income. So Roths have a couple of advantages that are slightly different, but again, there is no free lunch. You're going to have to pay tax either on the contribution or on the distribution, and we don't have a crystal ball to be able to tell where the tax rates are going to be. So it would be a discussion that you would have with your own tax preparer, with your own financial planners, and you'd have to make a decision that you think is right for your family. In a future video, I'm going to get into some of the uses, some of the ways in which life insurance can be used as a retirement supplement. I'll also give a couple of other ideas for supplementing retirement income. I hope that you have found something of use in this video, and if you have, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in a future installment. Thanks a lot.